welcome back to another episode of Sports Speak. I'm your host, Spencer Ripchik.
And I'm your co-host, Tanyon Loose.
Tanyon, how was your 3-day weekend, a nice long weekend?
It was pretty good. I got to go skiing, actually, so it was pretty nice. We had a little bit of a snowfall here, so I kind of enjoyed that extra snow and went skiing with some of my friends, so it was pretty nice. How about yourself?
Well, I don't really know how to ski too well, so I didn't go skiing. But I did go skiing down the Hub Lawn. I mean, that was kind of a hill right there with some inanimate objects.
A classic tradition here.
Yeah. So, as always, we're going to start this off with our favorite news of the week. So, Tanyon, why don't you start us off this week?
So mine's a little bit of a continuation from our last episode where we talked about men's volleyball, and I mean, they just kept pouring it on recently. They swept both BYU and Grand Canyon like we talked about, and now they take on a number 12 USC and number 2 UCLA on Friday and Saturday. But I mean, their success has been rewarded, and they moved up to number 3 in the AVCA rankings, so now they're just right behind Hawaii and UCLA. So I mean, those guys are playing really well right now, and they're going to be tested again this weekend, so we'll have to see how they handle that.
Yeah, well, the news that caught my eye this week was Seth Lundy was out against Ohio State on Sunday for Penn State men's basketball. He's Penn State's leading scorer, and he's one of the best defenders in the Big Ten, and I think he's one of the most underrated ones, locking down big names like Jaden Ivey, E.J. Liddell, and all other guys like that. They also had a game postponed today, or not today, but tomorrow. So now Lundy is said to be day-to-day, so maybe he can get some playing time against Iowa on Saturday, which with the game postponed will have a little bit more time. And now Jalen Pickett, Sam Sessoms are going to have to carry the offensive load like they did against Ohio State, and now we look to the transfers, Greg Lee and Giovanni Scott, to step up in the forward position.
Yeah, they did get a little lucky there with that game postponement and Lundy's health, kind of. So, I mean, he's had a great season so far. I remember I kind of knocked him a couple times last year for just the lack of his defensive ability and kind of effort on that side, but he's really just completely done a 180 this year. So, but now we're going to move on. We're going to talk a little bit about the team that shares the Bryce Jordan Center with Coach Shrew's various squads. So we're going to go to one of my favorite recurring segments, and that's Spencer's A-List. So he's going to talk a little bit about our Lady Lions basketball team.
Yeah, well, this week I have a list of the top 5 Big Ten basketball teams in my opinion. So let's get this started here. We got number 1, we have Indiana. Why? Because the Hoosiers are the best record in the Big Ten with the only clean sheet left. They came in as the 6th team in the nation on the AP poll recently, and their defense is legit averaging the 2nd fewest points allowed in the Big Ten, and they are a force you don't want to see on your schedule. Number 2, I have Michigan. Why? Naz Hillman is crushing teams' averages. He's crushing teams averaging 19.4 points per game, the 6th best in the Big Ten. Big reason is the Wolverines just beat the Big Ten favorites coming into the season by 20 points in Maryland. That's a lot of points. They're a team that will crush some dreams in the NCAA tournament looking down the road. My 3rd team is Iowa. I know the Hawkeyes are not ranked too high in the Big Ten with their non-conference losses, but they have one of the best players in the NCAA, Caitlin Clark, leading the Big Ten in scoring, averaging 25-plus points per game. So she's an absolute animal, and she's leading those Hawkeyes team to the top. Number 4, I have Maryland. Why? Because the Big Ten favorites coming into the season. But what an embarrassing loss to them for Michigan, so they're down more. I mean, 20 points. I don't know how you can lose by that much. The Terps still do have one of the best records in the NCAA, and Brenda Freese at the helm, so they are still a promising spot. My 5th team is Ohio State. Why? Because the Buckeyes have the best offense in the Big Ten, averaging about 83 points per game. The defense may not be there at times, falling in the middle of the pack, but they have beat teams by an average of 18.9 points per game. And then, coming in at 9, although we skip a few, we have Penn State. Why? The Lady Lions have a long way to make the top 5. They're similar to Penn State men's basketball in that they can beat the average teams, but they can't beat the top dogs. Not similar to Shrewsbury squad, Penn State has the worst defense in the Big Ten. The one thing Penn State does have going for them itself is McKenna Marissa. She's an absolute stud, averaging the 2nd most points per game in the Big Ten, but she has no defense to back her up, so that's why the Lady Lions are at 9 in my Spencer's A-list this week.
I think I like your list a pretty good bit there. I mean, I maybe consider flipping around Iowa and Maryland. I mean, Maryland just has a lot of depth of talent that Iowa doesn't have. I mean, you also can't go wrong kind of backing Caitlin Clark. She's just an insane basketball player.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to see her in the WNBA very, very soon, I'd imagine, tearing up cities across the nation. So, I mean, she certainly kind of could be a one-woman team there, but I think Maryland has the depth. I mean, Indiana, obviously, just a solid team all around. You can't go wrong with that. Michigan, Nas Hillman, great player. So, I mean, I don't have too many qualms with your list there at all.
Dang, we might have a first here.
I know.
Actual good list here. One sport that we've talked a numerous amount of times and is in the spotlight all the time, Penn State wrestling. And this week is our topic of higher or lower. So I'm going to ask the wrestling expert some higher or lower questions, starting with higher or lower 2 bonus points for Penn State versus Michigan.
I think I'm going to take the over here, which I really wrestled with this one a lot, pun intended there. But I mean, it's just these teams match up really well. So I kind of went and looked at it match by match, and I looked at 133 pounds with RBY. I mean, he's taken on a less experienced wrestler. I think he's a sophomore, realistically, but he has freshman eligibility in Dylan Raguson. But I mean, RBY has just looked really good this year. I mean, he's proven that he can get those bonus point wins. He can win big against opponents that aren't quite as talented as him, and I think he's just going to prove that he's still the top dog in that weight class there. And then looking kind of going right back to 141, the next weight class there, I mean, Nick Lee he scares me a little bit. He's coming off of protocols, which I mean, you can probably assume is COVID related. I don't know what else you can describe as protocols. So I mean, but his opponent, kind of a Stevan Micic, he scares me a little bit more, honestly, than Nick Lee coming off that sickness there. He just lost to a Pitt's Cole Matthews 11-5, who was really not ranked very highly at the time. So I mean, Micic hasn't wrestled folk style wrestling in 2 years now. So I mean, when you have that gap of experience there, it's a little bit of a problem. So I could see both those kind of going to be like major decisions at some point. And I think Carter Starachi, I mean, he's one of the most dominant wrestlers in the sport right now. He won the NCAA championship as a freshman, and there's no reason to think that he can't get things done again. I mean, he had a great start to the season. He had a match versus Maryland's Dominic Solis, I believe it was, where it was only a decision, but now he's kind of back that kind of falter a little bit in his step up with a pin and a tech fall. So he's really brought in the bonus points in the last 2 matches, and I think he does it again here. I mean, he obviously has better competition. So I think those are the 3 guys that I think can kind of put this team over the edge and get those bonus points that Penn State's going to need to take down this Michigan team.
Yeah, well, I'm not as experienced in the wrestling field as you are, but I'm actually going to say lower just because I feel like Michigan's out for blood this season. I feel like last season they weren't very highly up there, but now this season they're in the forefront. So I feel like it's going to be a really close match. I feel like those big names that Penn State has might get caught slacking a little bit in Ann Arbor on this weekend, so I don't know.
Yeah.
So I feel like it'll be tough to get those bonus points.
It's for sure possible.
But our next one, will Penn State have higher or lower 2 losses versus Michigan?
I'm going to go higher in this one. I think 2 losses probably was a little bit of a poor choice as an arbitrary number, because I feel like there's almost a guaranteed loss at 125, which Nick Sirianni he's looked phenomenal in his return to the sport. He took a year off there, and he's an ex-Penn State guy, and he got recruited to Penn State for a reason, because he's a dang good wrestler, and he's continued to be a dang good wrestler at Michigan. So he's probably the favorite for the NCAA title at 125 pounds, and I think it's really going to be Drew Hildebrandt. He's looked okay in his last couple matches, but it's just going to be the goals there to not get teched or even majored if you're Drew Hildebrandt. So I think that's going to be a loss there. Tony Negron at 157 is coming off a pretty rough loss where he was up 4-1 in the first period and then lost in OT. I mean, he was clearly not happy with that one, but now he's facing off against an even more talented opponent in Will Lewan, who's number 15 in the country right now. So I mean, I don't see him getting that done there. And then I had some questions about this one. I don't like Grady Berge coming back at 165. He's really kind of an enigma right now. You don't really know where he's at from a talent standpoint and a fitness standpoint. I mean, he obviously is able to go out there in the mat and compete, but you just don't know if he's at his peak like he was just a year ago. So he's facing off against a guy in Cameron Amin, he's a really solid young wrestler. I mean, he's going to be an NCAA title contender down the line, I imagine. So you just don't know if Berge is totally back. So I kind of gave the nod to Cam Amin there. And then I considered taking Mason Paris over Greg Kirkfleet at heavyweight, but I think that Greg is kind of going to get over the hump here and finally beat Mason Paris. He's struggled to take him down the last couple of seasons, and it's kind of held him back from getting to that championship match in the Big Ten, because obviously you have Gable Stevenson there at heavyweight. He's the Olympic gold medalist, so no one's going to take him down. But I think that if he can get this win over Mason Paris, that's a huge, huge step in his career and for this Penn State team as well. So I'm still taking the over, but I'm taking just 3.
Yeah, well, I'm going to agree with you just because some of the points you just said. I mean, Penn State sounds like they have a bunch of question marks on their team, so they could take some upset losses there. And they have there's some wrestlers at some different weight classes that may be shaky in those and might be tipsy-turvy, and maybe Michigan just being at home could be a big
Yeah, the home
component
field
there.
advantage is definitely going to be a thing there. But I mean, I'm just excited for this match. I think everyone in the wrestling community is. Honestly, it's really this year's because there's so much talent out there on the mat, and so it's just going to get put out there on Friday, and we'll have to see how it goes.
So next one is higher or lower. Penn State will have 3 national champions this season.
So I am going to go higher here, but maybe not even just higher as in 4, like a repeat of last year. I think this team has a legitimate shot to get 5 national champions. I think you have your obvious 4, which you have RBY, Nick Lee, Starachi, and Aaron Brooks, who are your returning champions. I think RBY, like 133 is not like the strongest weight class this year. I mean, you have Austin DeSanto, Iowa's wrestler. He's missed some time this year already, so you don't really know what's up there with him. And then you have the same thing with Dayton Fix. I mean, RBY beat him last year in the title and sudden victory OT, and I think if he did it once, there's no reason that he can't do it again. He doesn't look there's nothing really concerning about him, I'd say, this year. So I think if he did it once, he can do it again. So I'm going to take RBY at 133 and then 141. I mean, Nick Lee was my toughest decision here. I think he hasn't really looked as dominant as he was last season this year, but I mean, he's really struggled in the first half of the season just to stay healthy. He's been sick twice now. He's missed a number of matches. But I mean, it's going to be a tough route for him. 141 is pretty brutal this year. I mean, Sebastian Rivera, who's supposed to wrestle but was sick, of course, against Rutgers, has pretty much scored bonus points against every single opponent this year. He's teched a number of guys and pinned some more. So I mean, it's 141 is brutal. And then going to Carter Starachi and Aaron Brooks, I think those are probably your 2 most likely champions on the Penn State roster. I mean, both of them are pretty, I'd say clear-cut as the number 1 seed in their weight classes, and I think that if they did it last year, they can do it again. There's not anyone new I think that's going to challenge, except for Aaron Brooks. He has Miles Amin, so he's on Michigan's roster, and they'd be facing off on Friday. So if he beats him by a decent margin, I don't think there's any reason to say come March that matchup would go any differently. So this is kind of a little bit of a preview here for that matchup. And then my last one I was looking at was 197, Max Dean. And I think that he's kind of the most interesting piece of the roster this year, transferring him from Cornell. I mean, he's just wrestled phenomenally. He was down last match actually against Rutgers, came back, got the win in pretty commanding fashion. So I think that's one to watch. I think he is the number 1 seed in that weight class. AJ Ferrari, who's kind of like the most entertaining wrestler of last year's NCAA championships. But he hasn't looked all that spectacular this year. I mean, he hasn't lost, but he's not blowing guys out of the water every single match. So I think it's a close one, but I think I'm going to go with the home choice here and take Max Dean to win that one too and give Penn State 5 national championships.
Well, I'm also going to say higher just because last year they did have 4 national champions, and all those 4 guys are back. So this year it's different. Like anybody could be non-healthy, and I feel like health will be a big thing.
Yeah.
Because once one wrestler's out, they will put in another one, but I mean, there's not much you really can do.
It's been something that's ravaged the sport for sure this year. Guys are dropping left and right with different illnesses and whatnot.
Yeah, so
I think we're going to segue back onto the ice now after going from the mat there. So we're going to talk something we haven't talked in a little while about. Actually, we're going to revisit kind of a previous episode where we talked about women's hockey, and we made some predictions kind of earlier in the season. So we're going to revisit those and figure out, I guess we already know, if we got it right or wrong, and kind of just glaze over some of the things we talked about and what happened since then. So I'm going to let you start us off, Spencer.
Yeah, so our first buy or sell was Kira Zanin will lead Penn State in goals and assists at the end of the season, and I sold it, and right now this one is looking pretty promisingly. As of currently, Natalie Heising is crushing the rest of the team in goals with 16. Zanin only has 8 goals to her name this season, so there's a lot of catching up to do. The only problem I have is Zanin is slaying in assists with 20, which is 5 ahead of Heising. How about you?
She's done a great job for sure, and yeah, Heising's got that lead, and I think she's going to keep it. But I mean, there's plenty of goals to go around in this Penn State team. They're averaging almost 3 a game. So their offense really has been pretty strong this season, especially in the kind of the realm of the CHA there. So I think they're going to keep pumping out goals this season. But I think Natalie Heising's proven that she's the one that's going to get it done for this team.
The next one was Penn State loses more than 8 games this season, which I bought, and how it's turned out. I was right on the money with this one. Penn State currently has 8 losses, which, I mean, not really right on the money, but they just need one more loss. And they still have to play Mercyhurst still, who's the best team in the CHA standing. So, I mean, that could be a loss right there. And they still have a lot of games left. I mean, they have 11. So, I mean, just all it takes is one game for them to mess up that.
I think they have technically a max of 12 to go. I think if you include the CHA
True.
championships, so it's a little bit there. But yes, I don't think there's any scenario where they go 12-0 in their games there, and even if they win, I guess they almost guarantee, unless they win the CHA title, then they would have to at least lose one of those games at some point. So I mean, I think it's pretty much guaranteed they lose one more. It's been a little bit of a disappointing season, I'd say, coming off of the success from last year. It's had their ups and downs. I mean, I can't say that I'm watching every single one of their games, but from an outsider standpoint, I'm kind of having trouble like what to make of this team. Really, they beat some decent teams. They won over number 7 Minnesota Duluth and some other okay teams, and they just have just some really bad losses, like the 6-1 to Cornell just was not pretty really, and they've lost to conference foes already in Syracuse and Mercyhurst, who are sandwiching Penn State in the standings right now in the CHA. So it's just kind of, I mean, they lost a piece or two from last year, but it just wasn't the same, I feel like, the energy around the team like there was then.
Yeah, I feel like it's a very up and down season. It could go anyway these last couple of games. But the next one, I mean, we're 2-0 right now, but this is where it kind of gets bad for me. I said Penn State will keep less than 4 clean sheets this season, which I bought. How it turned out, well, this one was not really good because Penn State already has 6 shutouts, so I was clearly wrong right there. No hockey expert, but I thought it would be a lot harder to keep shutouts, but apparently not for Penn State.
Yeah, I got it right on the money there. I'm 3 for 3 so far, so yeah, like you said, they have 6 clean sheets, and I think there's probably a few more to come when they take on some of the other CHA opponents, like RIT, it's kind of down at the bottom there. I mean, the defense has done a lot of the work, it seems. They have the lowest goals against average. The CHA, they only have 1.97, but despite that, their save percentage is right in the middle of the conference. It's only 93% as a team. Their starting goalie, Josie Both, and the save percentage is only 91.5. So I think it's kind of showing that their defenders have just been phenomenal out there on the ice. Their goalie, I mean, she's no slouch, of course, but she's not top of the conference right now. But it's just the defense that's really looks strong for the Nittany Lions this season out there on the ice. So they've done a phenomenal job, and it's part of the reason why the Penn State's still in the conference title race.
Well, speaking of the conference title race, our last one was Penn State will win a second straight conference title, which I bought. And right now, I mean, they're in second place right now, so it's still there. I mean, they still get to play Mercyhurst again, who's ahead of them. So if they steal 2 games right there, they could bump them up in the standings. They have a bunch of other conference games, and like we said, if they keep on winning, then it looks like they could potentially get that conference title.
Yeah, I bought this one as well, so I mean, this is more of a wait and see. We're not quite there yet, but yeah, it's a 3-team race right now between Mercyhurst, I think, has 12 points, Penn State's there at 11, and Syracuse there at 10. So any one of those teams has a legit shot CHA title. I think Penn State plays series at home against both Syracuse and Mercyhurst. So I mean, that's pretty much just going to decide the conference right there. If they win, I mean, I guess they could split, and then in that case, like, you would think that all 3 of those teams would kind of wipe up with Lindenwood and RIT, who really is kind of at the bottom of the barrel in the conference right now. But it's just going to matter which of those 3 teams can kind of take the overall record out of those 2 series there. So I think Penn State with the home ice advantage could be the team that get it done. I mean, we'll have to see. They haven't really proven that they're a dominant force this season like maybe last year. So it's really up in the air at this point. So I'm anxious to see how that plays out for them.
Yeah, there's definitely a fun bunch of games at the very end of the season. But, well, that's all we have for Sports Speak for this week. We'll be back with another episode next week.
If you would like more coverage, just feel free to go to the Collegian website. And if you like this podcast, please consider subscribing to the Collegian YouTube channel. Thank you, and have a great rest of your week.